If you look at zero waste living as something that you have to do, or is you have to change every aspect of your life to be perfect and like fit into this ideal, it's going to be really hard. But it's never been really about that for me. It's not fitting into an ideal. It's not about achieving a goal. It's just about trying to live more sustainably and doing it in the best way for me during that current period in my life, right? Because obviously, my best effort today in the middle of a pandemic looks quite different than what my best effort was 4 years ago. My best effort looks different in different periods of my life, and so it's about being kind to myself, doing my best, but also ensuring that I'm working for larger change.
Welcome to the Wise Consumer Podcast, the answer to your eco-friendly and healthy lifestyle questions. How to reduce your exposure to harmful chemicals, whether or not it's normal to have a painful period, how to live an eco-friendly lifestyle on a budget, and more. With the help of experts, I'm talking scientists, toxicologists, endocrinologists, cosmetic chemists, you'll get knowledge and know-how to your most pressing health concerns and sustainability questions straight from the source. I'm Madeline Weisskopf, your host, confidant, and in-house science nerd, here on a mission to help empower, inspire, and support you in your own health and eco journey. Because friend, I am a firm believer that if you don't feel good, you can't do good. So pour yourself a cup of tea, kick off your shoes, take a deep breath, and let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Wise Consumer Podcast, Season 4. Honestly, it's been a bit hard for me to believe that I am still chugging along, you guys. It's been quite the winding journey since I first launched this podcast, and I'm just so thankful that you're still here listening and tuning in. Truly, it means the world to me. And friend, this season is going to be amazing. I have so many awesome guests lined up for you to hear from, learn from, and connect with. So stick around because every Wednesday for the next few months, I'll be dropping new and engaging conversations with expert guests on all things ranging from hormone health and nutrition to zero waste and conscious living. Now, as a friendly reminder, this podcast is here to support you, to inspire, encourage, and give you helpful tips as you trek along your own health, wellness, and conscious living journey. So if there are any topics you want to learn more about or wish I would cover in more depth, seriously, just feel free to pop into my DMs, email me, send me snail mail, heck, send me a raven with a scroll attached to its leg, whatever works for you, and share what you want to learn more about. This is our space, friend. I want to make sure you learn and hear from guests on topics you want to learn more about and are interested in, okay? Deal? All right, so with that being said, how about we just get started? Kathryn Kellogg's career began on the stage. As a child, she shares, she knew she wanted to be an actress. She loved storytelling, performing, singing. It was just a part of who she was. Today, although she's no longer performing full-time on the stage, her passion for storytelling and creativity are still at the forefront of everything she does. But rather than performing Shakespeare, Kathryn uses her talents and passions in her work as an environmental activist. Now, if you're not familiar with Kathryn's work, let me quickly fill you in. Kathryn is the founder of Going Zero Waste, a lifestyle website dedicated to helping others live a healthier and more sustainable life. She's also a spokesperson for plastic-free living for National Geographic, the chief sustainability officer at the One Movement, and author of the book 101 Ways to Go Zero Waste. She is a creative and inspiring voice in the zero waste living movement who has not only influenced my life, but countless others as well, and maybe even your own. I am so excited and honored to share her story, mission, and work with all of you today. More importantly, I know you're going to walk away from this conversation feeling uplifted, inspired, and ready to make simple, guilt-free, zero waste changes in your own life as well. So, without further ado, let's get started. All right, Ms. Kathryn, are you ready?
Ready to go.
Let's do this. Kathryn Kellogg. It is so wonderful to have you on the Wise Consumer Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we begin, I just need to let everyone know, as I just shared with you, Kathryn, when I first started my conscious living journey, wise consumer journey, you were the first zero waste blog I came across. And it's like, I am like your number one fan. Like I probably read everything on your blog. I just love you. So this is like an honor to be chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much. You flatter me way too much. And if you have been reading it for a long time, then you know the writing has gotten much, much better.
Absolutely. And you just updated your website. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it has been a journey updating the website. It has been over a year-long project. So when it was done, I was like,
Yes, so much work. And we're going to get into that. But before we do, for anyone who isn't familiar with you, I would love to know who Kathryn Kellogg is. How did you get to where you are today? Because from what I've seen, it's been quite the journey.
it has been really interesting. So I majored in musical theater, and theater has always been one of my biggest passions. And actually, when I was 3 years old, I said, I'm going to be an actor. Like I've always known that I wanted to be a performer. And then all of a sudden, my life took like a massive left turn into sustainability. And it's really fun that I get to use a lot of my skills as a creator and as a creative, especially because I think the true goal of being an actor is to be a storyteller. And I know that a lot of scientists, that's not necessarily their strong point. And but that is mine. And so it's being able to tell a story and be able to take a lot of these really large kind of scary principles or ideas and make them something that's more tangible, more relatable, something that people feel like they can have control over. So that's kind of how I got started. And being a full-time actor, I was very, very broke. So I started making a lot of these changes out of financial necessity. So I didn't actually realize what I was doing was eco-friendly until I moved to California, and it kind of all clicked for me that what I was doing for my personal health as well as for saving money was also related to the planet. And then I kind of looked at more of how all these things connected together, and I started my blog, which was mostly to keep in touch with friends and family originally. And then I wrote some posts on zero waste, and those got really popular, and the whole thing kind of exploded. And it's been really, really fun. It's just been a lot of fun to see how it's kind of evolved from a personal blog into what it is now.
Yes, because you've written a book, 101 Ways to Going Zero Waste, correct?
Yeah.
You worked with National Geographic. You're now the Chief Sustainability Officer for the One Movement, correct? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah. So just so many different things have come out of this, but I want to take it back to that moment where you said you took a big shift, because I think this is something that you and I share and have in common. In terms of, there's a book you've mentioned in a lot of your posts and in your videos, which I'm going to get it wrong, Estrogeneration.
Yes. Yes.
So I would love to hear your side of the story, because I think this is a lot. My podcast, I bring on a lot of hormone dietitians and nutritionists, skincare, cosmetic chemists for this very reason. I'd love to hear your story a little bit and how that's impacted your zero waste journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, I had a horrible hormonal imbalance. Well, I still have it. I've just managed to keep it a lot more in check. And I actually had a really bad flare up in January, which is the first time I've had a flare up in almost 6 or 7 years. But I was just in so much constant pain. I just had horrible mood swings. My sleep schedules were off. I had so much acne. My whole face had broke out with like really bad cystic hormonal acne. And it was, I remember going to the doctor, and they basically said, well, you kind of just have to live with it. And I was like,
yeah.
Okay. And I was trying to find ways to live a more natural lifestyle. And I started learning more about synthetic estrogens and how synthetic estrogens are in things like our beauty products, our cleaning products, things like our mattress, which off gas, carpets, all of these things, and how there's so many of them are just in our daily lives. And I don't think exposure to a few might be a problem, but it's just in so many of our products. And I just started switching for more green alternatives or DIYing things like cleaning products, which also saved me a lot of money. And so I really just started working to phase a lot of those endocrine disruptors out. And it was just really neat how that ties so much into the environmental movement and what these synthetic estrogens are doing in our waterways and how it's affecting marine life and it's how affecting our animals and how it's affecting human health. And I just think it's so fascinating that so many of the things we avoid for planetary reasons are also things that a lot of them affect our health as well. So I just think the links are really fascinating. And yes, the book Estrogeneration, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, which is funny. I've actually never read it. I read a lot of my husband's like, dude, all you talk about is your period and hormones. And I'm like, you're right, because I'm super obsessed with this. So when I saw that, I was like, I absolutely need to read that one. I haven't added that to my list. So I'll definitely check that out. But I just want to, to second what you said. I think a lot of like how I got into it, the only reason I ever came across your blog was when the doctor was like, if you don't take care of this, you may have cancer. And I was like, what the blank, So I really started getting rid of everything from my beauty products. And then when you look at, how is it packaged? And that's how I came across your blog. Cause I was like, well, if I'm putting this skincare product, that's not good. Well, then what about the things that I'm microwaving my food in? And that just, tumbled into this whole thing. Now I have a podcast and I'm talking to you. So it's just like, it's just really, really important, which is why I bring on so many different, nutritionists, cosmetic chemists, and everything to kind of, they all come together. But you are the zero waste expert, if you will. So I think, which is probably why my listeners are tuning in. They're not like, we didn't hear, we're not here to listen to Kathryn talk about periods, Maddie. I'd love for you to define, what zero waste is. And also there's different forms of waste. On your website, you have the lingo, you have, up waste, waste, pre-cycling. So if you could break it down for the listeners, that would be awesome. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so the technical definition is to send nothing to a landfill, but the more complex definition that I personally really like is to completely write waste out of existence, because you can waste so much more than just what you put in your trash can. And honestly, if that's the only thing we're looking at, that's a really big missed opportunity. And it's just a really narrow view. So when we talk about humans, right, our most non-renewable resource we have is time, right? So we don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste money. We don't want to waste resources. There are so many other things that we can waste beyond just trash. So I prefer to take a more holistic view, so that way it encompasses human health as well as planetary health.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the myths? I think, when I tell people like, oh, I'm eco-friendly, and I think you've mentioned this on your blog, people like, I'm so sorry, Maddie, like I'm really trying, what are some of the myths around zero waste first and foremost? And what are some tips you can share for people when it comes to, that perfection that they may feel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the first myth I wanted to bust as soon as you said that was that you have to be perfect, right? You don't have to be perfect to make a difference. And I think that's why it's so important to understand the reason why we're making positive consumer choices. It is not because the crux of the world falls upon the individual consumer shoulder, right? That's not what this is about. The reason why we're making sustainable choices by voting with our dollars, and of course, actually voting for candidates who have policies and environmental legislation and are working to ensure to make policy and legislation easier for everyone, is that we're showing that there's demand in the market, right? That is all it's about. It's about showing demand so we can use our actions as leverage and proof, so we can force our politicians and we can force businesses to make more sustainable changes. So it's not about you and me being perfect. It's just about using our actions to show there's demand in the market. The second myth, of course, is that it's time consuming. Well, yes, if you're trying to fit all your trash in a mason jar, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty time consuming. However, if we're making a few small changes, it's really not that more time consuming, right? If we're switching out paper towels for cloth towels, how much longer does it take to reach for a cloth towel, wipe up the spill and hang that cloth towel to dry and then throw it in the washing machine, right? That's the exact same action of taking a paper towel, wiping up the spill and then throwing it in the trash. It takes the exact same amount of time and has the exact same steps. It's just slightly different. So no, it's really not that much more time consuming, especially when you remove the perfection complex. And then is it more expensive? It depends. I mean, it depends on your overall mindset. But for me, I've saved so much money because reusable products are inherently cheaper than disposable ones, at least in the long run. Of course, it does take a small investment to get started up front. But when you use it over a long period of time and you repair what you have, you continue to use what you have and love what you have and opt for reusable items over disposable, and you're absolutely going to be saving money.
What do you say to people? Because these questions come to me all the time. Like, well, is it actually more sustainable to use a cloth napkin? Because aren't you going to be washing it, or those kind of things? What are your responses, and what advice do you have for that?
So this is a great example of looking at trash and it being a really narrow view, right? This is like a really narrow view because we have to take one step back and kind of look at the overall life cycle of a product. It takes 8 gallons of water to make a paper plate. It takes 37 gallons of water to make a roll of toilet paper. It takes so much water in the creation of our products. So if you have an average dishwasher, a modern one made within the last 20 to 30 years, every time you wash a load, it only uses around 3 to 5 gallons of water. So you could wash an entire load of dishes for the water cost of one paper plate. So it's just reframing how we see our objects and the resources that go into them.
So another thing, thank you for answering that, by the way, because that's something that comes across a lot, that I get asked a lot, especially from family members, no names being named here. But the other question that I get asked a lot is recycling. And when it comes to recycling, I was very disillusioned when I started my zero waste journey, as I started really understanding what recycling is and the myth around recycling. And I guarantee most of my listeners are in the same boat, especially depending on where you live. There's different rules. So what is wish cycling, and what tips do you have to consumers and or individuals listening, wherever they live? Where do they get the resources to find what the responsible recycling practices are?
I love the term wish cycling so much. So wish cycling is when you go to your recycling bin and put something in it because you're wishing and hoping and thinking and praying that it's going to turn into a new item. And that is just not the way it works. Like, your recycling bin is not a wishing well. You do not put something in and something magical pops out on the other side, recycled. Like, that is not how it works. And so many people think of recycling as a charity or a charitable thing because we've been so conditioned that recycling is fantastic. So therefore, recycling will save us and it must be great. And people who do it are just magical human beings. But it's a market and a business, and it relies on other businesses buying that recycled material. So the next time you go to your recycling bin, and want everyone to do this, next time you go, I want you to look at it and I want you to say, would someone pay me for my recycling? And if the answer is no, you probably have some work to do. So number one thing is contamination is a huge issue. And a lot of that comes from food products or putting the wrong items in the bin. The best way to always check what goes in your bin is with your local waste hauler's website, or give them a call. But on average, most recycling companies accept these very common items. And it's better to stick with the common items and put them in properly than it is to put in excess things just in case. Rigid plastic 1 and plastic 2. You want to make sure those are clean and dry. Like, you don't want to put a half-filled bottle of Coke in the recycling bin. That needs to be clean and dry. For instance, a yogurt tub or a peanut butter jar. If you have something, put a little bit of water in it, swish it around, make sure it's clean. You just don't want it contaminated. Paper, not paper towels, not paper napkins, just regular paper, junk mail, that sort of thing. That's fine to put in there, but you don't want to put anything smaller than a Post-it note. So no shredded paper. Also, like, no plastic bags. You don't want to put any of those in your recycling bin. Glass, of course, aluminum and steel. And you can recycle aluminum foil. It just needs to be clean and ball it up into a ball so that way it's larger than 2 inches.
That's really helpful. And actually, my recycling place, I was horrified. I thought they recycled glass when I first moved here, and I kept putting glass in it. And then, like, 6 months after I moved, without knowing, they removed glass. So my husband was just like, and I want to talk about bringing your partners into this, because my husband was like, well, if you really want to recycle glass, then you can drive it to the glass recycling. And I do. We drink beer or wine or whatever people are having. And I just haul it in my car and bring it to the glass recycling. A lot of people aren't going to do that. And I realize that. So for that person who's like, oh my gosh, are you effing kidding? I am not going to put glass and like take it to the recycling. Thoughts on that?
So glass recycling is really interesting because a lot of glass currently, the recycling that it's used for is landfill cover.
Mm.
It's really expensive to recycle glass. Not a lot of places do it. It's very heavy. And for many waste haulers, it's cheaper for them to landfill it or use it as landfill cover than it is for them to truck it all the way to the recycling facilities, which is really unfortunate because if you look into the sand that's used to create glass, we're running out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a very specific type of sand. It's not beach sand, it's a different type of sand. And we're running out of it. So we really do need to figure out how to recycle glass in a more efficient way. But the most important thing you can do when it comes to glass is reuse them. So if you do get things in so if you do get things in jars like peanut butter or salsa or marinara, reusing those jars or cleaning them and donating them or listing them on a free cycle group and giving them away is one of the best ways that you can have a positive impact in that way.
So you're mentioning a lot of food packaging items, and that I'm just thinking of, I'm going to focus on the busy mom here. Okay. So the busy mom who's like, I don't have time to necessarily, it's much more efficient to go to the grocery store, buy the fresh tomatoes and make tomato sauce so you don't have any packaging. But maybe every week you make marinara sauce. So you have like 12 different marinara jars out of glass because you're making pasta for 12 weeks straight, let's just say. You're not going to reuse that all the time, are you? And I'm putting a scenario, like I'm just thinking as some of my listeners here. What advice do you have for that parent?
So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a tricky situation. But if you're a member of a buy nothing group, or if you're a member of a local free cycle group, oftentimes if you snap pictures of those things and you say, hey, I've got these jars for free, they're on my porch if you want them, because a lot of people do reuse them and a lot of people use them in crafts and projects and small businesses, and there are other ways to upcycle them. If we're looking at only using jars for food, then that's also kind of a missed opportunity, right? Because I use jars in my bathroom to store my bobby pins. I use jars in my garage to sort nuts and bolts, and there's all different ways that we can use these materials. We just have to think about them in a bit of a broader sense. But yes, is it a problem that the system isn't designed to help people recycle and renew materials? Absolutely. And that's not a person's fault. That's the company's fault. That's the lack of it's a lack of extended producer responsibility. And what I would do is I would email the company and say, hey, you sell this in my town. This can't be recycled. This can't be reclaimed. This can't be reused. So what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to fix it? Because we have these issues. And one of the best ways to have companies fix these problems is to start using recycled material in their products.
Yeah.
So what you're also could be asking is, I think that you should be using 50% recycled glass for your glass containers.
Yep.
And ensuring that these companies, because once they have to buy the recycled materials to put it back into their product, that's going to lift the whole market and encourage so much more recycling. So hopefully we can close the loops on these processes.
I love that. And are there any sources you can think of? I'll obviously include some in the show notes, but is there anything that comes to mind? So let's say I wanted to, do you just reach out to a brand and ask them these questions? Or is there a network you go through? Where do they go?
Oftentimes I email brands directly, but if people do want to get involved, there's a great bill currently in the Senate, I believe. It could be in the House. I'm not sure where it is currently in its legislation process, but it's called the Break Free from Plastic Act. And what it would do is it would require manufacturers to have X amount of recycled material in their products, which would lift the whole recycling industry. Yeah. That's what we need.
Absolutely. I love that. I will put that in the show notes. I'll do a little bit of research, find something, because I'm sure there people can get involved. And that's an easy way to get involved. Yeah, that's great. I want to shift gears a little bit because this is kind of a personal thing. I'm so on board with a lot of eco-friendly living, and my husband is slowly getting on board with it. But there's certain things that he just won't do. I just want to get your thoughts on this because I know I'm not alone in this, trying to get him like my husband's a Marine, so he likes certain things the way he's always wanted the same product. I'm like, why don't you try this zero waste shampoo bar? And I get an eye roll, he's really good about composting and so many other things. But what tips do you have for anyone who might be in my position and ways that we can kind of lovingly nudge and bring them in?
So I think one of the best ways is to just this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but just don't at all.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, if they do run out of shampoo and then all of a sudden yours is there, then they're going to use it, right? And as long as you haven't created a pressure point around it, so it doesn't become an issue, it's just there and it just is an option. And it takes time. And I'm not saying it's easy, but so many of our swaps and changes have happened over time because my husband is also very stubborn and he does so many things as well, but some of those little things and some of them he's just not going to budge on. And that's okay in the grand scheme of things. For instance, he loves his ice cream. And I know I've mentioned this on my blog before. And so every month he goes out and buys a pint of ice cream. And, if that is his thing, I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. That's all.
I agree. And I'm happy to hear you say that because I think there are other, pick your battles. You know what I mean? So I think like my husband loves beer. So, he gets his beer from it's like a sustainable and it's he doesn't get cans. He gets, would be fine too. But just little things like that he does. His little weaknesses. And I think that's good. Pick your battles. That's great advice. What has been the most challenging thing for you when it comes to zero waste living?
I always get this question and I never have a very good answer. And I think it's because a lot of it for me is about attitude change. So it's never been, if you look at zero waste living as something that you have to do or is you have to change every aspect of your life to be perfect and like fit into this ideal, it's going to be really hard. But it's never been really about that for me. It's not fitting into an ideal. It's not about achieving a goal. It's just about trying to live more sustainably and doing it in the best way for me during that current period in my life, right? Because obviously my best effort today in the middle of a pandemic looks quite different than what my best effort was 4 years ago. And then when I started, working with my local government, my best effort looked very different then because I was focusing more on policy and maybe I didn't have time to drive all the way to the winery that does the wine refills. So my best effort looks different in different periods of my life. And so it's about being kind to myself, doing my best, but also ensuring that I'm working for larger change because once again, it's not about us being perfect and having larger systemic change is so important. So if you have to pick and choose, emailing your businesses, writing your reps, those are two of the most impactful things you can do. And then make a few small changes, right? I mean, it's very simple for most people to make a few small changes.
I love that. And that's so important. I had a sister who suffered from postpartum depression and anxiety. And there's just like in that phase of a woman's life or in her life, there's no way she was going to be like, I'm going to clean the glass baby bottles and use a reusable diaper. There's just, you got to do what works for you in that phase of life. So I think I really appreciate you saying that because there are going to be different times. If you're sick, if you just had a baby, if you're, unemployed for some reason, there's just so many different things. And to not be perfect and to take that off and just try your best every day with what you have, I think is such an empowering message.
And when you are in that stage of life, I think what's so important to ask yourself, and this is one of the reasons why I really loved having my bulk stores closed. And that might be a really strange statement, but my bulk stores are completely closed. I can't zero waste grocery shop anymore. And I love it because what it's shown me is still how little trash I produce. So before I would be so scared of doing this, but now I just go to the grocery store and just buy whatever I want. And my trash can is this big. People aren't watching, they're listening. My trash can is about 3 feet tall. It's a pretty small trash can. And I take it out once a month. And that's with just buying whatever I want at the grocery store. And that is, I feel, is really empowering. And then what I can do is look at what the trash I'm creating and say, this isn't my fault. I'm not selling this product.
Mhm.
So how can they make sustainable changes so that way all consumers can benefit rather than just a select few that have time to go to a bulk store and buy their
Yep.
groceries without packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So what are tips for that for that individual who is, maybe they live in a food desert, maybe they don't have a budget to even shop at a bulk food store. What are tips you can share when we go grocery shopping to reduce waste but still just shop conveniently in this day and time?
So one of the best things is just for all so in the US, on average, we waste 40% of our food. 40% of food goes uneaten. And with a fraction of that, we could feed every single family that's food insecure in the United States. It is wild. And a lot of that does come from the home.
Mhm.
So reducing food waste automatically is going to be a huge way to have a positive impact and reduce overall emissions, reduce waste, help you save money. So really focusing on eating what you're buying
Mhm.
is a great start. Storing your produce properly, so when you get
Mhm.
home, chop it or put it in a nice container so that way it's readily available, you can see it,
Mhm.
you can actually use it, and that way it won't go bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So 100% on board with you on that. I think food waste is one of the easiest ways. And I'm actually working on a nutrition course right now. I just got certified in recipe development. And one of the things that I really want to focus on is how can you use all of the ingredients that you're working with? So for instance, I just shared yesterday a recipe on, like, I'm dating it today, but like kale pesto by using the kale stems, or, using the peel of lemons for your cleaning products. So I think absolutely food waste is one really, I don't want to say it's simple because some people don't have time necessarily to do that, but it's an easier way than trying to be like, let me just make everything from scratch, all my bread, all my tomato sauces, etc.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree.
So moving right along, Kathryn, another question I often get asked is, there are a lot of questions that I get asked that I want to ask you, but let's start with this: zero waste travel. As we start getting back into, I mean, we're far from traveling, but let's say post COVID and people are traveling again. Um, what are some simple ways? I think it's easier to live maybe more sustainably when you're in your own little routine. You have your grocery stores. Tips for listeners who want to continue being eco friendly while they're traveling, please.
So one of the things I'm really excited about is sustainable air travel
Mm,
becoming a thing. And during 2020, we had electric passenger flight, the very first hydrogen powered passenger flight. Wow, say that a few times fast. And also I don't know if the cargo ship was electric or hydrogen powered, but there was also a cargo ship that was powered by one of those two. And JetBlue in San Francisco is also trialing a jet fuel that's made from waste, and it reduces emissions by 80%.
cool.
So obviously the airline industry has been set back a lot in 2020 because uh yeah, no one was really going anywhere, but I really hope we start seeing even more of these innovations happening to reduce the overall impact of traveling. But until we're there, one of the things I always do is I try and buy carbon offsets for my flight. And I know offsets are not a long-term solution. So instead, it's more about traveling more meaningfully. So instead of a bunch of shorter trips, try and take a longer trip where you can actually spend more time and maybe even build more of a sustainable habit and more of a sustainable routine, being in a place a little bit longer rather than a bunch of short trips back and forth.
Yeah, that's great. And when it comes to, I'm like, well, we're just going to do a 180 here. I'm just boom, 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 asking you like a lot of questions. But when it comes to your pet routine, for instance, that's another thing I get asked a lot. What are some tips you can share there when it comes to Nala and like poop waste or whatever? What's your routine look like for that?
So we often compost her waste in the backyard
Mm-hmm.
when that's possible, but when we're out, we obviously pick it up in a bag and we throw it away because there's really no solution for pet composting. Even if your city has a composting program, they don't accept pet waste. There are very few. There's one dog park in the UK that has a dog poop composting program on site, and they use the methane from the waste to power the lights at the dog park. And that's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So I hope that we start seeing more initiatives in that way. I think that would be amazing. But for right now, there's really not a ton when it comes to that aspect. When it comes to her food, we're always very mindful of opting for lower carbon footprint. So we would opt for turkey rather than beef.
Mhm.
So it's a lower carbon footprint. I and my dog is so incredibly picky, so picky. When we rescued her, she was super underweight,
Oh.
and it took us over a year to get her to a normal weight.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, getting her to eat has always been very difficult.
Mm.
And I'm not going to comment too much on vegan dog food. If
Yeah.
that is what someone would like to do for their dog, that is fine. That just does not work for my life, and or for my dog's life, I should say. Toys, opting for natural toys that are longer lasting. We don't really do stuffed toys because she'll just destroy them
Yeah.
within 1 minute. I remember we actually went to our local dog boutique once, and they said, well, if she rips the toy up and in about 2 weeks, you can bring it back and swap it out if she does it. We were going home and she had already destroyed it. We didn't even make it home. And so I decided then that we would never buy another stuffed toy again. It doesn't make financial sense. It'd just be way too many for her.
Yeah.
So we just opt for longer lasting, more natural toys. And we love to go on lots of long walks. So
Do you use biodegradable trash bags when you're picking up her waste, or do you just use a regular plastic bag from like a bread bag or something like that?
yeah, I really like to upcycle any bag that has come into my life. That makes
Hmm.
it a lot easier, especially since more packaging has been
Yeah.
coming into my life. That's a great way to reuse it,
Yeah.
as well as we've bought both. But since you can't actually compost the dog bags,
Yeah.
it's more of saying, I don't want, it's more of a statement of saying, I prefer to see things manufactured without plastic. But
Yeah.
we've also wound up with plastic ones as well when they were out, and we don't really sweat it.
I tried the biodegradable and I almost got my husband on board, but because we don't generate enough trash to take it out very often, and whatever brand I had bought started decomposing in my trash can, and when my husband went to get the trash out, yeah, you can imagine. He was like, never again. I don't care about your zero waste goals. Like, we're using regular trash bags. Do you have like any thoughts or like another brand or anything? Like, how do you do it?
So I would be curious about, I need to look into this, but I'd be curious about the life cycle analysis of a plastic bag versus a biodegradable one when it comes to trash.
Yeah.
And since it's not going to, even if it was, you know, even if it does decompose, it can't actually break down in a landfill because
Yeah.
landfills aren't aerated. Landfills are designed for storage, not decomposition. So it won't break down, similar to food waste, right? Like food waste won't break down in a
Yeah.
landfill. So I need to look at life cycle analysis and look at the resources that go into each of those bags. And then I would just pick whichever one has fewer emissions.
That's a great tip, and absolutely we'll look into that. Because that's been like kind of like every time I'm like, oh, but he's like, no, last time you got a biodegradable one, we had trash all over the floor when I took it out. He's like, babe, I love you, but I have my limits. I was like, oh man. So wow, we're just like getting through these. I really appreciate this. And I know my listeners are getting so much value out of this. So thank you, Kathryn. And of course, going back to periods, as I mentioned, my favorite topic, but you've mentioned periods in your blog and on your posts. So I would love for you to be able to share, what your zero waste period routine looks like, challenges that you may have had, and your thoughts when you first started.
So zero waste period products have been one of my all-time favorite swaps. So yeah, I'm jazzed to talk about periods. Let's do it. So I love my Thinks period panties, and I bought my first cycle set in 2015, right as it's right after they ended their Kickstarter or whatever and
Right at the
actually launched.
beginning. Yeah.
Yes, huge fan. And then when they wanted to work with me 3 years later, I was so honored, and I took all these photos for them. And it was so funny the email I got back because it was such an old style. They didn't even carry them anymore.
Oh.
And they said, well, we'll send you some new pairs. Don't worry. was also a testament to how long they held up and how
Yeah.
well they lasted. So I'm a really big fan. Menstrual cups are great too if you have a heavier flow. I typically wear my Thinks alone and just wear a menstrual cup when I'm going to be doing some sort of water activity. But they also work great in combination together. And yeah, honestly, it has made my periods a lot better as well. When I was having my really, really bad issues with my hormones, I mean, I would
Mm.
have 14-day plus
Oh my
periods.
gosh, I can't
They were
imagine.
really bad, really heavy. And learning that a pad contains 4 plastic bags worth of plastic blew my mind. And the fact there's plastic in tampons and plastic in pads, and both of these things are endocrine disruptors, and they've got fragrance and they're bleached, and it's just all these issues. And I know that switching to more natural period products has absolutely helped.
Yeah. So I have a few questions here, personal questions. What are your thoughts on like organic for people who are like, I'm getting into this zero waste thing, not ready for the sinks or the menstrual cup. Can I do organic? What are your thoughts on that? Organic
Yeah,
disposable.
organic is absolutely better. Organic tampons specifically, you can compost those, which that still might be too much for people. But Thinks has a reusable tampon applicator, so you can buy the like a huge box of the organic tampons and then keep using the same applicator over and over again, which would probably be the method that I would go for because its insertion would be a lot smoother
Yeah.
than using ones that are just cardboard,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
brutal.
so brutal.
And then also you'd be saving so much money.
Yeah, absolutely agree. What are your thoughts on the menstrual cup? And I bring this up because what I found out the hard way was that you need to find a menstrual cup that fits in your cervix, and everyone has a different cervix size. So mine got stuck, quote unquote, because um, yeah, I mean, stuck, quote unquote, because yeah, I obviously got it out, but it was an ordeal. And I freaked out. And I actually did a podcast episode on this because I thought it was just so ridiculous. Like, I remember going downstairs and telling my husband, because I was like pacing back and forth in the bathroom, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's stuck. Like, I cannot get this out. And I went downstairs and I said to my husband, I was like, just so you know, this is happening. So if I have to go to the ER, God forbid, and tell them like, hi, I need help getting my menstrual cup out. I just wanted to give him a heads up. But I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to Google like what happens. And lo and behold, I'm not the only person who's ever Googled this. And it literally was, they were saying like, you know, when you're doing Kegels, just push your menstrual cup out like you're doing Kegels in the shower. I got in my shower, did Kegels, and finally got my menstrual cup out. Long story short, this is probably, everyone's like, this is way too much TMI, Maddie. But long story short, I have not found a menstrual cup that I really like yet because I need to find one that fits, and they're kind of pricey. So I don't want to be spending like $30 on a cup that doesn't fit, because you can't just be like, hey everyone, like this one didn't fit. Do you want it? You know what I mean? I think people are like, kind of like, there's certain things I don't mind using from someone else, but that may not be one of them. What are your thoughts on that? And, or did you ever experience anything like this?
This is so funny. So I was really nervous about using a menstrual cup because I've never really liked tampons. Tampons have always been very uncomfortable for me. So I thought that a menstrual cup would be worse. But my friend had Soft Cup, which is a disposable disc, but you
Oh
can use.
yeah.
And so she said, "Well, I have some, obviously unused." And
Oh.
she was like, "Here, just try it." So that way I could get a feel for it, and that helped a ton.
Mm.
And kegling your cup out has always been kind of my go-to. Even like on the toilet, you just kind of kegel it out and then flip it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, so I'm with you on that. But Intamina makes a reusable disc, which I think works incredibly well. I love the
Mm.
disc, as well as I have a lunette cup. I have a few different types of cups, and all of them have worked pretty well for me. I haven't had too many issues. But I will say, if anyone wants to use a cup for the first time, definitely use it with lube. Don't be afraid of using it with lube. It helps with
That's a
placement.
great tip.
It helps you understand it. So I used lube the first 2 times, as in first two periods. So I understood how to place it and really understood how to position it. And it was easy to get out. And that made it just so much easier in the future.
That's such a good tip, because that was probably part of my like learning curve, was like, how do you insert this in a way that, you know, is actually works? And that may have been part of the problem as to why I got stuck, was I didn't insert it correctly. So, okay. So long story short, you use your thinks, and I actually love my thinks. And highly recommend. I know, Kathryn, you have a discount code. Could I share that in the show notes?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'll link that up in the show notes, because yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great, I really like their products. The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, oh yes. If a scenario here, because this is again something that a lot of people bring up. I'm just like back to back, like asking you questions. But there are certain products that people don't like that are maybe more eco-friendly. Like they've tried it and they're just like, nah, I don't really like this. What are your thoughts to someone who is trying to find a product, is also trying to be budget friendly, but they know like this deodorant that I've used has always worked and I don't want to switch. I tried switching, it didn't work, etc. Like that's one example.
Yeah, stick with what you know, stick with what you love, stick with what you like. I mean, when it comes to beauty products, especially, all of the waste of consistently trying new products to hopefully find something that's going to work for you, that's not super great. As well as we often buy just so much. I do this all the time. I don't know why. I get around 3/4 of the way done with something, and then I think to myself, oh, I need to buy a replacement, or I need to get something else. And then I buy the new thing, and then I just start using the new thing. And then I get about 3/4 of the way through and I do it again and again. So I wind up with all of these quarter filled products. And so one of the best rules I've implemented when it comes to this is a strict one out, one policy. So I don't wind up with 16 lipsticks. I have 16 lipsticks. And this helps me actually use what I need. Same thing with a makeup capsule. Why do I need 3 mascaras? I do not need 3 mascaras, but I just, for some reason, have a problem finishing things. So I make myself finish the product, finish the whole product, and then you can buy something new, but only until you finished it.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. I think I really, for everyone listening, I think things to pull out of this conversation is it's not about perfection. It's okay if you like a product that's been packaged in plastic, if that's the one you really love, because that'll reduce you trying all these other products. And then also finishing it, setting rules for yourself. I really like that. Like finish this before you go do that. And that's the same thing. Like before you grocery shop, look in your cupboard before you go buy, you know, another head of lettuce or kale or whatever, and then you have 2 and one's wilting, and then you know, like have to figure out how to make the most of it. So I think, do you have other rules like that you've put in place for yourself that have been helpful?
Absolutely. So similar to that, look in your closet, specifically do your laundry, put your clothes up and look in your closet before you go shopping. That's huge, because what you'll often find is what you need is probably just in your laundry and you can't see it. So you kind of forget it exists.
Yeah.
A 30-day buy ban, this has helped me a ton as someone who was absolutely an over shopper. If you see something and you like it, say, great, I will wait 30 days. And if you're still thinking about it in 30 days, go for it. But you're going to cut so many impulse purchases. And when it comes to shopping secondhand, it's more of the idea of the item. So for instance, I got an email from Reformation a few days ago with these knit dresses, and oh my gosh, I want it so bad. But then I said, okay, 30 days. And I haven't really thought about it since then, which means I probably don't need it. And now what I can do is say, okay, well, I really like to look at that knit dress. Now I can shop on Depop and try and find one, or ThredUp. And then I can buy one secondhand, and I can buy one that's even more eco-friendly than buying from a shop.
Absolutely. I think I just did that unknowingly, but as you say, you're saying that I've been wanting a jumpsuit for like 2 years, and I just haven't found one. Then finally, for everyone listening, I'm so proud of myself. I made my first thread. I normally don't shop for clothes. I'm not super into fashion, except locally there are a few vintage places that I really like secondhand. But ThredUp, I'm all about secondhand shopping. I've just never purchased from ThredUp. And then I was like, you know what? I've been wanting this jumpsuit for a really long time, and I finally purchased a jumpsuit, and I'm so excited about it. And you know what? It was probably from a fast fashion brand, but it's taken it out of the waste stream, and I'm going to love it, you know?
Yes, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Any other tips that you have in regards to zero waste? What are some questions you get asked all the time that we may not have covered?
Oh man, I get asked so many questions
I bet.
about everything. There's not really a good one that pops off the top of my head of questions that I'm asked often. I just get asked a lot of random things all the time.
People just like DM you, or like when you're doing interviews like this, or like network TV things?
All the above.
What's the weirdest question and also zero waste swap you've ever made?
I don't know if it's the weirdest, but it also is my favorite, which is a bidet attachment.
What are,
Best.
what are your thoughts on the bidet? I just I have one, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
I'm obsessed. I love it so much. And that one was my husband's idea. I was a little nervous, but I've become so convinced. Every time I leave my house and I have to go to the bathroom, I'm just sad because there's not a bidet there. And every time my husband and I travel, we're always just so sad because there's no bidet. And all we can think about is, man, I wish we were at home where we had a bidet.
Do you have one with temperature monitoring or just cold water?
So it does have temperature monitoring, but it doesn't actually work. So it's
Okay.
just cold water. Granted, we live in Northern California, so it's not freezing, but I can imagine that if I lived in New England and it was the winter, then that could be very unpleasant.
I know my listeners will probably have not used the bidet, so I think this is actually okay to explore a little bit here. I actually find it very refreshing when I'm like tired in the morning and I'm like, whoa, I am awake now. Like that water is cold. But for anyone who's not familiar with it, how does it work?
So
Without
bidet
going into
attachment,
like all the details, obviously.
so typically you can buy a bidet attachment for your toilet. It hooks up super easy. And as someone who has moved a lot and has rented, it uninstalls and installs in less than 10 minutes. So it's a very quick thing that you can do, even if you're renting an apartment. And basically it sprays water, so you're washing yourself rather than wiping yourself. And it's just so much cleaner. And one of the best ways it was explained to me is, if you had poop on your hand, would you wipe it off or wash it off?
Exactly.
And for anyone going back to our water question from earlier, it takes 37 gallons of water to make a roll of toilet paper. So, and in the US, we flush 27,000 trees down the toilet every day. So by using less toilet paper and using a bidet, you're saving tons of trees, you're saving water, and you're going to be just a lot cleaner.
Mic drop. Well, Kathryn, it was great talking to you. We can leave it right there. No, but seriously, this is one of the reasons that I do these conversations, because it's little things like this that you just, if you're just in the beginning of this, it's like learning these kind of things. You learn these things and it kind of sits with you, and knowing that there are alternatives, whether you do them today or in a few weeks or in a few years, it's just being open, I think, to making these alternatives and trying your best to make a difference to, as you said, let our, the people who are making the rules, the laws, the businesses know that there is demand for this. There is demand for bidets, there is demand for eco-friendly toilet paper. There is demand for like less packaging. And I think we're in a really cool time right now. Obviously we have a ways to go, but even since I started my journey, like 2 years ago, or 2.5, there's been a lot of change, and more brands are, I just spoke to the founder of Cheekbone Beauty, and she just came out with a zero waste lipstick that works amazingly. And that was not always the case. Like you couldn't always get really great makeup in sustainable packaging. So I just want to acknowledge everyone, businesses and individuals like yourself who are leading the movement, empowering and inspiring others to make those changes. And doing the hard work, because it is a lot of work, Kathryn. Doing what you're doing, I imagine it's a lot, you know. It's fun, I'm sure, but it's you do run a business, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And also I will say that after having done this for so long, so many of these things are just habit.
Mm,
And it really is about building habit. And so
mm,
sometimes that habit is tougher to build in the beginning. So getting in the habit of carrying your reusable water bottle with you, that is going to take time to get adjusted to. But once you are adjusted to it, it doesn't take any more time. It's something that does become second nature. So many of these things I do, they really don't, I don't feel like I live a different life, and I don't feel like anything is taking tons more time for me because so many of these things are just embedded. And also, does it really take more time to use a bar of soap than it does to use body wash, right? Like, and also when you kind of start viewing things slightly differently, it all adds up as well.
yeah, absolutely. This has been such a great conversation. Is there anything before I let you go that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I've had a blast speaking with everyone. And I think the last thing I would like to leave all of these listeners with is to not be overwhelmed, which is much easier said than done.
Yeah.
But one of the best ways to do that is to just pick one thing. So instead of
Mm,
thinking about all the changes you have to make or all the things you might have to do, just start with one. Just start with one thing that you can change today. And once you build that habit and that becomes second nature, then switch something else. So pick one thing and commit to it.
I love that. I love that. So for everyone listening, just think about one thing you can pick. I'll put a few ideas in the show notes, whether it's starting in your bathroom, starting in the kitchen, starting in your, well, public transport might be a little bit more complicated, but you get the idea. And then pick that thing and then stick to it. Kathryn, what does it mean? This is my last and final question to you. What does it mean to be a wise consumer to you?
So to me, it means being very thoughtful. And when I say thoughtful, it's not about what you want in this instant. It's about looking at the whole life cycle. Where did it come from? And where is it going after I'm through with it? So think about the whole journey of a product and think about how it fits into your life and think about its future and its past and how you can ensure that something that is going to add value to your life and truly be a meaningful addition and not just another thing.
Absolutely. And final, where can we connect with you?
So you can find me on my website, goingzerowaste.com. And I'm probably most active on Instagram, which is going.zero.waste.
And she has an amazing YouTube channel full of amazing tips as well. So highly recommend you check her out. Check out her book. And Kathryn, thank you so very much for the work you're doing and for taking the time to sit and chat with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Absolutely. All right, friend, that about wraps it up, but this convo does not have to end here. I would love to hear from you, so please send your questions and comments my way. And if there's a topic you want to hear more about, send me a DM on Instagram at @TheWiseConsumer or email me at hello@thewiseconsumer.com and let's chat. In the meantime, could I ask you to do me a huge favor, please? I'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes out of your day to subscribe to my show and leave me a review if you haven't already. You can do so in the iTunes app. It's that purple icon that comes preloaded on most smartphones, but I've also linked it up in the show notes if you're not sure how to access it. Anyway, that wraps it up for today. So until next time, friend, be safe, stay healthy, and take care. Hi, friends. As always, just ending this episode with my obligatory disclaimer. Please remember, the wise consumer is intended for educational purposes only. The content being shared here should not be used as a substitute for professional care by your healthcare provider. I am not a qualified medical expert, nor do I pretend to be, so please note that the content and research I share and explore on this podcast is not intended to treat or diagnose you. If you have any medical questions, concerns, or wish to make changes to your diet, please speak to your physician or any qualified healthcare professional for that matter. The wise consumer may not be held responsible for your health, dietary, or lifestyle decisions. I am simply here to encourage you to seek healthier, more eco-friendly, and conscious alternatives. While the Wise Consumer podcast offers information from many sources, the opinions expressed are solely those of the Wise Consumer and not those of any affiliate or other entity. Additionally, while I always do my best to source and research the most up-to-date and accurate information, I realize science is continually evolving. If you come across any scientific information that is blatantly incorrect, please kindly email me at hello@thewiseconsumer.com. And finally, this podcast and any other offerings of The Wise Consumer may contain copyrighted material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner because it is being used for educational purposes. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this podcast or any other offerings of The Wise Consumer for purposes of your own that go beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner.